Hey guys, and welcome back to History Revision Success. And I'm here again with another video on the GCSE AQA exam board to give you all the exam technique tips, tricks, strategies to deal with the usefulness question or the source question on the thematic paper. So that will be applicable to Power and the People, medicine, and migration. So again, there are 4 questions, and today we're going to be focusing on number 1, the how useful is a source question. I think this is probably one of the most difficult questions because you can't really prepare for it, although you can look at as many sources as possible and hope and see maybe one of those will come up. But what I've got is some tricks that will really enable you to go through the right process when you're in the exam itself. And even if it's a source you've never seen before, you'll at least know the process to go through and the way to write it out so you hit the mark scheme. So questions will look like this. How useful is source A to a historian studying the tactics in the Peasants' Revolt? How useful is source A to a historian studying the impact of the Black Death? That's for medicine. And finally, for migration, how useful is source A to a historian studying British involvement in America in the 18th century? And you'll be given the source in an insert booklet, which will be with your paper. Now, you might have a written source, you might have a picture source, whatever it is, you have to deal with it in the same way. Important words: useful. The bit in orange is really important because you're not looking at this source in general. If you do that, you will be missing the point of the question. Sometimes I've seen past questions which just say, how useful is source A to a historian studying the Peasants' Revolt, for example? And that is, amazing for you because you can write about anything. But most of the time, they give you a specific focus. So I need to look at that source and only come up with points about tactics. How does it show me tactics? Or for the Black Death, how does this show me the impact? That's really, really important. And then finally, you'll obviously have your event. They might give you a time period, but they're probably just going to give you the event. Structure. So all of the 8-mark questions, I recommend 2 paragraphs. This one, I think what's best to do is to have 3 slightly smaller ones. The first paragraph, you want to write about useful. Why is the source useful? And we'll go through why it might be useful in a second. The second one, you want to write about why is it limited. And then I think it's best to have one on the end where you just look at provenance. I'm going to talk about what provenance is at the end of this video. But in order to get above 6 out of 8 on the mark scheme, you have to write about provenance. So if you want to get full marks, if you want to get a grade 9, a grade 8, a grade 7 even, you need to hit that. Now, you can put that provenance into one of the earlier paragraphs. If you're going to praise the provenance, you could put it into paragraph 1. If you're going to critique the provenance, you could put it into paragraph 2. So you have 2 paragraphs. But I think there's no reason why you would not just have it at the bottom, because then it really clearly shows you're doing it. It doesn't overly confuse the rest of the answer. I also don't think there's a problem if your usefulness paragraph is bigger, is heavier than your limited paragraph. Based on doing AQA marking, limitations are very hard to get marks for because you don't want to be writing about what you can't see. Okay, so I'll go through that when I talk about the limited section of this video. I'll go through that in detail, how you make sure you do get the marks for it and you don't lose those marks. But yeah, if we're talking about structure, there's no harm in having a bigger paragraph 1, a slightly smaller paragraph 2, and a slightly smaller paragraph 3. Yeah. So for the purposes of the video, I'm going to use this as my exemplar. How useful is source A to a historian studying the causes of the Pilgrimage of Grace? So we know we're looking for usefulness. That's very important as a skill. We want to know why this is useful to us. We're looking at the causes. That's very important because I don't want to go looking at events or outcomes. And my event is the Pilgrimage of Grace. So I recommend when you write about sources and when you look at your picture in front of you or your text, to look for 3 things. Step 1 is literally going to be, what can you see with your eyes in the picture or in the text? So as an example, I can already see something that's, sparking my interest of a cause, and that's going to be the fact that Henry VIII has his feet on the Pope. Now, if you're thinking, oh, I wouldn't be able to remember what Pope it is, you do get a piece of information with this source. With every source you'll be given its provenance at the bottom, where it's come from, what it is. And within that provenance, it told me that it was Pope Clement VII. So you wouldn't need to remember that. You can just notice that there is the Pope, okay? It also tells you there that his feet are on him, so you know exactly who he is in the picture. So I can see with my eyes that he has his feet on the Pope. Step number 2, I'm going to think about what that suggests, what the source suggests. So I'm thinking now, I'm inferring from what I can see, I'm using my head to infer, and I'm saying, okay, that means he's saying, I'm more powerful than you. And I've put that into slightly better vocabulary, and I've written, Henry asserted his superiority over the Roman Catholic Church. Now, all the time I'm thinking, is this a cause? Pilgrimage of Grace was primarily caused by religious reasons. It was primarily Catholics who wanted a return to the Pope, return to the Catholic Church. Therefore, this is definitely a cause. Henry saying, no, we're not going to listen to the Pope and canon law and the Roman Catholic Church anymore, was a cause. Therefore, I can go ahead with it. Third step, now I'm going to use my brain. So I use my eyes, I inferred, and now I'm using my own brain, my revision, my knowledge to provide some evidence that would support the fact this is relevant and useful to us. So the idea is that if you were an alien, somebody who had no idea about any of this, and you looked at this picture and you saw Henry with his feet on the Pope, does that help you in understanding the causes of the Pilgrimage of Grace? We're saying it does, and we're now providing the evidence to back it up. So the evidence, Henry created the Act of Supremacy, which asserted his superiority of statute law over canon law. Now that's some grade 9 terminology there, so I've put in brackets what that means just to help you if you haven't heard those terms before. That means he's asserting his country's law, the state's law, over the Pope's. So prior to the break with Rome, prior to the Act of Supremacy, the Pope had the ultimate authority over England. If he created a canon law, it would have superiority over the English law. Henry is stopping that. He's disregarding that. This was one of the demands of the rebels, a return of the Pope as a spiritual leader. Okay, so I've provided some specific knowledge and I've made sure it's clear why that reflects the exact question. So to write it up, always start with your topic sentence. Source A is useful to a historian studying the causes of the Pilgrimage of Grace as it shows. So you literally copy out the question, but you change the wording slightly. You can replicate that question, that topic sentence, for any question, just change the key words. Henry VIII with his feet on Pope Clement VII. Step 1, using your eyes. Very important you don't miss this. Don't go straight into your inference because you'll have missed a key step of identifying and using the source. This is very, very important to hit on the mark scheme that you're using the source. Next, this means, or you can say this suggests, one of the causes of the Pilgrimage of Grace was Henry's assertion of superiority over the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. Step 2, we're making an inference. We're saying, what does it mean? How does this reflect a cause? And finally, this is useful as, with the Act of Supremacy, Henry made himself head of the church in England. This prioritized statute law over canon law and removed the Pope's jurisdiction. This was one of the main causes of the rebellion, as the rebels wanted a return of the Pope as their spiritual leader. Okay, so we've got our 3 steps. All 3 are absolutely integral to making sure you can get full marks on the mark scheme, and it makes it really clear and easy to do, hopefully. I've just put that in a paragraph there. Done. Now, I want to run through as well how you might do limited, because limited is a little bit trickier. For marking for AQA, one thing that's very, very obvious is they don't want to award marks for people that write, it doesn't involve anything about money or economics, because that's not in the source. That does not show you engaging with the source, okay? It shows you talking about things that aren't there. So you can only write about things that you can actually see. So you're looking for things which are either misdirecting you, which are giving you false information, or which are leading you down a path which is wrong, okay? Now, for the purposes of this source, when I was looking at this, I couldn't see anything which was necessarily incorrect or which would make me, think something false. But what I did notice was that all of the causes that are presented here are all religious causes. Now, I could go into this and want to write down that there are no economic causes or political causes in this source. But that would be risky because maybe I wouldn't get the marks for it because I'm writing about something which isn't there. So in order to prevent that, I need to think of a way to twist my point to make sure it reflects the source. Now, the problem with this source, therefore, is that it suggests the causes of the Pilgrimage of Grace were monocausal. There was only one of them. It suggests that religion is the only option. So I'm going to write, the source suggests that the Pilgrimage of Grace was caused by religious reasons, because that's what I can see. Now, it'd be better if you also added there a little example. For example, we've got the Pope on the floor, you've got monks who are dissatisfied and unhappy, you've got the religious advisors there handing Henry VIII the Bible, okay? What does this mean? This means the Pilgrimage of Grace was monocausal. Rather than writing, this means the source has left out economic and political causes, because that's not what the source shows. The source shows me it's monocausal, it had one cause. Evidence to support this. Now is where you can come in with that evidence about the fact that actually economic and political reasons were also important. So I've written a little piece of evidence here. Pilgrimage of Grace had many causes, for example, economic, such as the practice of rack renting, political, the marginalization of Catholic faction in the north, caused primarily because of the divorce between Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII. Hopefully that makes it slightly more clear how to go about reacting to limitations. Also might make it clear why limitations is okay if it's a smaller section. Putting it all together then, source A is limited to a historian studying the causes of the Pilgrimage of Grace, as it shows multiple religious causes of the event, such as the role of the Pope. So I've given that specific example there. This suggests that, so do you see that the starter sentences are almost identical? The event was monocausal. This is limited because, and I've just explained again what I previously went through, that there are economic and political reasons as well. There it is all together as one paragraph. In terms of going back to our structure, I would suggest you try and find 2 points for why is the source useful, 1 reason why we might say it's limited, and then 1 comment, or perhaps if you can manage 2 comments on provenance to say why the provenance either helps us, is useful, or hinders us, is limited. So provenance, what is it? Now, every time you're given a source, you'll be given a description at the bottom of the source, which runs through what it is, what it's called, perhaps what it shows, where it was made, who it was made by. And all of that information is the source's provenance. One way of remembering this is NOP, nature, origin, and purpose. So the nature, what is it, okay? Is it a newspaper? Is it a photograph? Is it a piece of law? Is it a speech? Is it a diary entry? What is the source in front of you? Origin, when was it written and who was it written by? And purpose, why was it written? And you need to deal with 1 or perhaps 2 of these options. Now, one way of doing this is you can summarize some generic useful and limitation points for each type of source, okay? And again, if you would like me to do a video just on this, running through all of the different types of sources and why they're useful and why they're limited in a generic sense, like and comment and tell me that's what you want. But here, for example, I've got some points about photographs and points about drawings or paintings. So in any exam question, if I couldn't think of anything else, I can just say, well, the drawing is useful. The fact that it's a drawing makes it useful because it shows, it's the way that at the time they would have presented current events. It shows that this information has been passed down, that this artist has specifically selected these events to portray in this particular way. We might say that, for example, we can see that there's a level of censorship in this drawing, and therefore, they've left out the fact that the rebels murdered the Archbishop of Canterbury if it was talking about the Peasants' Revolt. This shows that the king is trying to control how society is given information, and that tells us that society at the time was more controlling, or whatever it is. You can twist from these generic ideas. A photograph, for example, is simply a snapshot of what happened. That's good because it's raw, it's real. What you see is literally what happened. However, we've only got this part of the whole scene. We don't know what's happening here. We also don't know if the image was directed or set up. We don't know what happened before or after. So you can come up with some generic points which you can use, you can replicate. Now, it's better to try and be more precise, but those generic points are definitely extremely useful if you find provenance difficult. You want to try and aim for kind of 7 out of 8, which would still give you a grade 9 if you got that score on every answer. If you do want to go and write a more precise, more specific kind of response, this is how you might do it. So this particular source is a woodcut, which was called The Pope Suppressed by Henry VIII, and it was interestingly published in 1570 in John Foxe's Book of Martyrs. Now that's helpful if you know who John Foxe is and what the Book of Martyrs is. Now, John Foxe was a Protestant who wrote a book under Elizabeth I, which celebrated the martyrs, or the people who died because of the oppression of Catholicism. So therefore, it's interesting that he's chosen this image to use in his book. So you might want to go through the nature, the origin, the purpose. So it's a woodcut or it's an image from a book. It was created by John Foxe, or was published, by John Foxe. The actual artist is unknown, but it was published by John Foxe in 1570. And the reason is that he wanted to emphasize the suffering caused by the Catholic Church. So what do we do now? Well, starting sentence, the provenance of the source is useful or it's limited because it was published in a book intended to celebrate Protestants and criticize Catholic oppression. So therefore, I've chosen to focus on kind of a combination of origin and purpose, but really the fact that this book was created by John Foxe for this reason. And I've stated that in my first sentence, my topic sentence, so we know exactly what's coming. Now I'm going to go straight into this is useful because, and I need to come up with a reason why it's useful. Now, it might be your kind of instinct to always go, well, that means it's biased, it's wrong, okay? Rather than immediately going to it's biased, it's wrong, try and think, how does that help me learn about this? And remember, we're focusing on causes. So I'm saying it's useful to us because it suggests the rebellion was caused by the break with Rome and the Act of Supremacy, an event celebrated years later by Foxe, but hated by English Catholics at the time. Somebody who's writing relatively close to this event, this happens in 1536, the book's written, around 30 years later, 25 years later, 24 if we're being very precise. And he is suggesting that this moment was pivotal in the progression of religion in this country. I can interpret that, I can take that and say, actually, that's really useful to me in learning about how people of the time saw this event and therefore saw things like the rebellion that followed. You can also go down the line of, this means it's less useful or it's limited because he's got a clear purpose for writing. He's trying to write with the, intention of emphasizing the suppression of Protestants and the celebration of Henry over the Catholic Church. But yeah, just an idea. Try not to always automatically go down that line. Try to think, what does this teach me? How do I learn about the event from this? Why might it be useful? Always thinking of that alien person who knows nothing about anything. They've arrived from a foreign world. They've just touched down on Earth and they want to know, what can I learn from this picture about this event? So therefore, we'll go back to the structure. Why is it useful? Why is it limited? Provenance. And that is my quickfire guide to the usefulness question. Hopefully it was helpful. Coming up next, I've got a video on the essay-based question, the 16-mark question, the really difficult long one in this module. And if you find these videos useful, please give me a like, subscribe, leave me comments what you would like in the future. It's really helpful for me to know what you want so I can really produce worthwhile content, which is actually helpful for you guys.